Good morning and welcome to your next episode of the Menopause Morning. Well, I say good morning to most, but good afternoon to those on the East Coast. And today we're going to talk about a very important subject and a subject that's impacting you probably greatly on a daily basis. And it really is tied into the simple fact that if you're dealing with any kind of menopause symptoms, then you're also most likely dealing with chronic inflammation. And let me kind of put this together for you so you understand what's going on, what it means to you on a daily basis, and how you get, and really most importantly, how you can work on uncovering what's causing all this and address it all appropriately. Now, first off, before I get going, I want to talk about something you hear me, if you've been watching the Menopause Mornings, you've heard me talk about this before. And this is very important because the simple fact is that the only two symptoms of menopause is that it would be either you're not having a monthly cycle and you're no longer able to conceive. Those are the only two true symptoms of menopause. And about 15% of the 2 million women every year that enter menopause, those are the only symptoms they're dealing with. All right. So all these other symptoms such as weight gain, mood swings, hot flashes, sleeplessness, fatigue, brain fog, the list goes on. Those are all symptoms that your overall hormonal system, which is really referred to. I've done full episodes on this in the past, where it's that system is basically how your brain, your hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenals work collectively together. Now, when you go from childbearing years to perimenopause to menopause and then postmenopausal, if this system is working well, then your only symptoms are, again, no longer having a monthly cycle and you can't conceive anymore. And I've been working with women with menopause for heck over 21 years now. And really, every woman is pretty excited about those two symptoms, right? And it's the other symptoms that are the challenges, though. Now, when you start to kind of equate together the symptoms that you've been told are menopause with inflammation, they really go hand in hand. Because number one, for you to have menopause symptoms, it means that, again, that brain, hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenals, that HPA axis isn't working. All right. Now, what's very important with that is understand that this is not just about your body's inability to properly produce and balance estrogens and progesterones and testosterone. That system plays a role in the whole of your body, and it plays a big role from an inflammatory perspective. And so this is kind of a twofold aspect, because if you're having menopause symptoms, then we know that your HPA axis is off. And your HPA axis plays a big regulatory factor in creating and also, most importantly, eliminating inflammation. And if you're going to have menopause symptoms, if this is what you're dealing with right now, and you're inflamed, well, then you have to think of, well, why are you inflamed, right? And now part of it is, if this HPA axis isn't working, you can't produce the natural level of cortisone that you need to deal with the inflammation that you have in your body right now. Now, what would you be feeling with that? You could have, you could recognize it when you get up in the morning from a night's sleep, or if you get up from a desk after sitting for a while, that your body's very, very stiff. And more advanced level of inflammation, it's not just stiffness, but you would be dealing with regular aches and pains. Other symptoms of chronic inflammation also tied into, maybe your brain isn't working as sharply as it used to, be dealing with a little bit of brain fog. You could also recognize that you're gaining weight. A lot of people think that weight gain is only that you're putting on fat on your body. But really, when you're increasing inflammation has weight to it. And then here's the other kicker with when you're inflamed. When you are inflamed, it does increase fat cell production. And then that increased fat cell production leads to insulin resistance, eventually leads to insulin surges. And then here's the irony there. Then those insulin surges creates more inflammation for you. So kind of round and round you go. And you're just dealing with this level of inflammation all the time. And And the problem with that is, when you're chronically systemically inflamed, you're going to feel poorly. It's a part of what you think are your menopause symptoms are really symptoms of you dealing with inflammation. And if you're wondering what chronic inflammation causes, just go to your favorite browser and just type in what does chronic inflammation cause, and you'll pretty much see every chronic disease state known to man, which will be driven by inflammation. Yeah, so it's kind of a twofold approach, because what's interesting with this is the same things that are triggering your menopause symptoms are really the same triggers typically for inflammation. Yeah, so I've done episodes on each of these specifically, but this could be triggers such as dealing high spike proteins in your body, could be triggers of infections in your gut, could be triggers of food sensitivity, could be triggers of high levels of chronic stress, it could be triggers of toxicity in your body, and the list goes on. So what happens then is the same triggers that are triggering your inflammation are also the same triggers that are triggering your hormonal system to work inefficiently. Yeah, and this is something that I do on a regular basis, because for most women, and perhaps yourself, you think that, well, what's wrong with my the reason why I have menopause symptoms is because my hormonal system doesn't work. Well, there's a level where that's correct, but then let me help you understand is that your hormonal system is a response-based system. Yeah, so in essence, what's happening is that you have triggers and these same triggers for inflammation are the same triggers for your hormonal system, because when you're inflamed, your body wants to produce higher amounts of what's called cortisone, and that's your body's natural anti-inflammatory. All right, so when you are actually in a place where you've got a lot of cortisol production, which is your body's primary stress response hormone, and a lot of cortisone response, which is your body's natural anti-inflammatory. This actually takes your hormones down the pathway of what is referred to as like a fight or flight pathway. See, and the problem with this is that when all of your hormones, or a better percentage of your hormones, are going down the fight or flight pathway, and because your body will prioritize that, right? So what's happening though is if everything's going down the fight or flight pathway, now that depletes what's known as your DHEA pathway. And after DHEA, you produce hormones such as andros, testosterones, and estrogens. You see, so you get kind of stuck in this the proverbial rock and a hard place, because here you are, once you go from childbearing years into perimenopause, your ovaries are not doing the job with estrogens and progesterone that they have in the past. And you've always had, as a woman, you've always had a dependency on your adrenal glands to produce testosterone, because you don't have testes, right? Just like men don't have ovaries. And so the trap that you get into is all of your mother hormone, which is something called pregnenolone, gets pulled down the pathway of the fight or flight to produce the cortisol and the cortisone, due to the chronic mental emotional stress and then the chronic inflammation. And then that's always going to be the priority of your body. Well, then you leave a deficiency down the DHA pathway, which means you're going to be deficient in andro, testosterone, estrogens, and you're going to wonder how this all fell apart. Yeah, but the good news is there's an understanding of what's going on. You can understand what your triggers are and address those appropriately. And then you can also work on balancing your hormones naturally, so you can eventually get to the point, regardless of where you're at in perimenopause, menopause, or postmenopausal, you still have the ability to maintain perfect estrogen production. You still have the ability to continue perfect progesterone production. You still have the ability within your adrenals to produce the testosterone that you need to stay motivated, to build muscle, to get lean in your midsection, to have feelings of intimacy and drive on that level. And so there's so much that you can do, yet you're often told that you can't. right? You're told that you should suffer with this because this is what happens when you're a woman. And I say all the time, whether you believe in God or some other higher power, do you think that God really designed your female body to fall apart at the age of 50? And I would say no. Your body is designed perfectly to maintain a perfect hormone balance really throughout your life, not just in childbearing years. Yeah, and you've just been told lies about what you should suffer with, what symptoms you should have, and that the only hope for you is to take bioidentical hormones, and that's simply not true. It simply isn't true. I've been working with women for over 21 years, and it's a completely natural approach to get your body back into the balance that you were designed to be in. So with that, hopefully this is helpful for you. If you do recognize that you have symptoms of inflammation, again, whether you're just stiff when you get up from sleeping or sitting at a desk, or if you have aches and pains, or if you're dealing with the weight gain, if you're dealing with the brain fog, if you're dealing with any of this, recognize that inflammation is likely the probable cause behind it. And I always want you to understand the inflammation isn't the problem. The problem is whatever's causing the inflammation. So you just simply have to get to the core of that. And that's what we do together. So with that said, hopefully if you learned something today and you have a pathway that you can go down to help with your overall improvement. I do these menopause mornings every Tuesday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. And I would also say that there's a recording of each episode. You could go to my YouTube page and just I'll put that in the link in the bottom, and then just go and search with the category of menopause mornings. There's a wealth of information already there that you can actually utilize to really kind of change your thoughts about menopause, to change your response with menopause, to change your symptoms, and to really get into what I refer to as the new menopause. So have a great day, and I hope you enjoyed this information. See you next Tuesday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. Bye-bye, everybody.